I want to try and place Israel and its relationship with the United States of America, particularly in a military sense or in a defense sense, if you like, on the front burner. So let's begin by talking a bit about the move or the redesignation of the State of Israel from being under the EUCOM, the European Command, over to Central Command. Israel moved into CENTCOM from EUCOM. Now, I'd like to know what, in your view, is the reason for that. What's the virtue of that? But I'd particularly be grateful if you could apply your answer to the Abraham Accords and speak to how those may have facilitated this adjustment and what the virtuous outcomes of that adjustment are likely to be.
Okay. Just history. I was always taught that Europe EUCOM was responsible for Israel because it was very awkward to have the EUCOM commander or to have the Central Command commander go to Egypt, go to Saudi Arabia, and then go to Israel. So the idea was to carve Israel out and have another US commander deal with them so you don't have the same person building relationships, making friends, flying airplanes from one to the other. I sort of get that. At the same time, that's not recognizing the reality of where Israel actually sits. Right. And if you look at the problem set of stability in the region, Israel's security and whatnot, whenever you divide a problem in pieces, then nobody owns it. You get an incomplete response to it. And so I think the idea of moving Israel back geographically or in command and control wise makes sense. I think that we have got to look at security the United States, have got to look at security in the region holistically. We have in the past and we will in the future, and that irritates all the participants. Because if you take a big view in 1947 and then 48, when the United States leaned forward and recognized Israel as a state, immediately parts of the Islamic Arab world turned on the United States, and our stature with them changed significantly. We had been in a special place because we weren't the British and we weren't the French. You know, we just didn't have that colonial legacy, so people didn't hate us for that. So as a consequence, we got oil deals, we got all kinds of stuff in the 30s. And then once we recognized Israel as a state, that changed it. People suddenly said, okay, we know what you really are. And so it changed the dynamic for the worse, obviously, because when you have a harder dynamic, you have less influence, it's harder to work things. So the United States has got to look holistically, which means we're always going to do less than Israel wants and less than our Arab neighbor or our other Arab allies want, because we'll be trying to do a balancing act. We'll be trying to get people to the table and whatnot. That can feel very frustrating sometimes, because when I was a young person, I remember the '67 war I was in 7th grade. And then when I was at West Point, we came in one day and the October '73 war had erupted. And I mean, there's no getting around it that the sympathy, the automatic connection was with the Israelis for lots of reasons. But the reality was, when you have a situation like that in the region, if you can't think long-term and holistically, unless one side is going to be wiped out and done away with, you're going to have to figure out solutions to the problem. And so I think that things like the Abraham Accords, the move to normalization are good. I think that there's been a big move on the part of many of the Islamic states in recognizing the reality of Israel. And I won't even say that, you know, whether they like it or not, that is the reality. There is a state of Israel. It is stable. It's not going anywhere. I sometimes describe it to people. It's like the rock in the shoe of that region. Whenever they walk, they're reminded it's there, which is irritating to a lot of people, as you know. But I think the longer you go and people accept certain things as realities, then you can move to something maybe more stable, maybe more long-term. And of course, that's you never go back to what I said about insurgencies. You're never going to solve any problem as long as the root cause of the problem is there. It will come back in different manifestations. So I think there's room for continued evolution.